The morning Marcus Whitmore walked into his own company wearing a faded jacket, cheap shoes, and an old employee badge, nobody recognized the billionaire standing in front of them. For 10 years, Marcus had built Whitmore Industries from a tiny office in Chicago into one of the most successful technology companies in America. He had millions of dollars, a luxury penthouse, private cars, and everything money could buy. But there was one thing he no longer had: the truth. Every report that reached his desk said the company was thriving, employees were happy, customers were satisfied, and managers were treating everyone fairly. Yet Marcus had begun noticing something strange. People smiled whenever he entered a room, but their eyes looked afraid. Complaints mysteriously disappeared before reaching him, and employees who had worked beside him for years suddenly resigned without explanation. Marcus realized that somewhere between the corner office and the factory floor, he had stopped seeing what was really happening. So he made a decision that would change his life forever. He would disappear into his own company and discover the truth as an ordinary employee. If you believe kindness, honesty, and second chances can change someone's life, take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share this story with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this. 3 days later, Marcus entered the company headquarters under the name Nathan Cole, a temporary maintenance assistant hired through an outside agency. His expensive watch was gone, his tailored suit was replaced with worn jeans and a gray hoodie, and his perfectly styled hair was hidden beneath a baseball cap. Even his closest executives would never have recognized him. At first, Marcus found the experience almost amusing. Employees rushed past him without a second glance. Some complained about their salaries while others complained about managers. He listened quietly, taking notes in his mind. But the amusement disappeared during his first week. Marcus discovered that the company he thought he knew was divided into two completely different worlds. On the upper floors, executives enjoyed catered lunches and private meetings about productivity and profits. On the lower floors, ordinary employees skipped breaks because supervisors threatened to reduce their hours if targets were missed. Workers were afraid to report problems because complaints often resulted in fewer shifts or sudden termination. Marcus watched one elderly employee named Harold Bennett quietly eat half of a sandwich during his break and save the other half inside his locker. When Marcus asked why, Harold simply explained that he was taking the rest home for his wife because money had become tight after her medical bills increased. That moment stayed with Marcus. He had approved millions in bonuses for executives, while people like Harold were choosing between dinner and medicine. Marcus began looking more carefully. He met a young single mother named Grace Miller, who arrived at work every morning before sunrise and stayed late almost every evening. She never complained, even though she was exhausted. Marcus learned that Grace had nearly lost her apartment after her childcare costs increased, but she kept working because her 8-year-old daughter depended entirely on her. What shocked Marcus most was discovering that Grace had applied 3 times for an emergency assistance program offered by Whitmore Industries. Each application had been rejected by management without anyone explaining why. Then Marcus found something even worse. An internal employee report showed that dozens of assistance requests had been rejected, while the company had quietly increased executive bonuses. The report had never reached Marcus because his chief operating officer, Richard Caldwell, had filtered the information before it reached the executive floor. Richard had been telling Marcus that employee morale was excellent while privately intimidating managers and manipulating financial reports. Marcus felt betrayed. Richard had been with him since the company's early days. Marcus had trusted him with everything. But instead of building the company around Marcus's values, Richard had slowly created a culture based on fear. Employees were treated like numbers, and anyone who questioned him was pushed aside. Still, Marcus didn't reveal himself. He wanted to know how far the problem went. One evening, while cleaning an office after everyone had left, Marcus discovered a folder accidentally left on a desk. Inside were termination lists, employee complaints, and emails showing that Richard had ordered managers to hide workplace injuries and silence unhappy workers. Marcus's hands began shaking as he read through the pages. One employee had been fired after reporting unsafe equipment. Another had resigned after being denied medical leave. A third had written a heartfelt complaint explaining that she could no longer afford food for her children. Every complaint had been marked with the same word: resolved. Marcus knew then that his company wasn't broken because of one bad decision. It was broken because he had been absent from the people who depended on him. But the final discovery nearly destroyed him. Marcus found an old resignation letter from his former assistant, Claire Donovan, who had left 6 months earlier. In the letter, Claire explained that she had tried repeatedly to tell Marcus about the problems inside the company, but Richard had blocked every attempt to reach him. She wrote that Marcus had once inspired her because he believed success meant giving ordinary people a better life. She had resigned because she no longer recognized the company he had built. Marcus sat alone in the empty conference room that night, staring at the letter. For the first time in years, the billionaire cried. Not because he had lost money. Not because someone had betrayed him. He cried because he finally understood that his greatest mistake wasn't trusting the wrong person. It was failing to listen. The following morning, Marcus walked into the executive boardroom, still dressed as Nathan Cole. Richard was there with several senior managers, confidently discussing another round of cost reductions. Nobody noticed Marcus standing silently near the door until he placed his old employee badge on the table. Richard looked at him with confusion. Then Marcus removed his baseball cap. The room went completely silent. Richard's face turned pale. Marcus didn't shout. He didn't threaten anyone. He simply placed the evidence on the table and explained that he had spent several weeks working alongside the employees everyone else had forgotten. He had seen their struggles, heard their stories, and learned exactly how the company was being run when the cameras were turned off. Within hours, an independent investigation was announced. Richard and several managers were removed from their positions, and the financial records were audited. But Marcus didn't stop there. He created an employee emergency fund, increased wages for lower-paid workers, introduced transparent complaint systems, and required executives to spend regular time working directly with employees. He personally called Harold and paid the medical expenses that had nearly destroyed his family. He helped Grace keep her apartment and established childcare assistance for working parents. But the most emotional moment came weeks later. Marcus walked through the same factory where he had once worked undercover. Harold saw him and smiled. Grace stood nearby with tears in her eyes. Marcus told them that he had learned something more valuable than anything he had ever earned. A company isn't truly successful because of its profits, buildings, or stock price. It is successful when the people who give their lives to it can go home feeling respected. Months later, Whitmore Industries became more profitable than ever. But Marcus no longer measured success by the number displayed on his financial reports. He measured it by the smiles of employees who were no longer afraid to speak, by families who could afford their bills, and by workers who finally believed that someone at the top actually cared. One afternoon, Marcus found an envelope on his desk. It was from Harold. Inside was a simple handwritten note thanking him for remembering that employees were human beings before they were workers. Marcus placed the note inside the same drawer where he kept his most valuable documents. He had once believed that being a billionaire meant having everything. Now he understood that wealth meant very little if you couldn't use it to make someone else's life better. If this story touched your heart, please support the video by liking it, sharing it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness still matters, and subscribing to the channel. Sometimes one small act of compassion can completely change another person's life. And before the story ends, I have one special request. Comment, "Kindness changes everything." If you believe true success is measured by how we treat the people who have nothing to offer us in return. Marcus never forgot the lesson he learned while pretending to be someone else. He had entered his own company searching for a business problem, but he discovered something much deeper, a human problem. And in trying to fix his company, he finally fixed something inside himself. Because sometimes, the person sitting in the highest office needs to step down to the lowest floor to understand what leadership really means. And sometimes, the greatest fortune isn't the money in your bank account. It's the lives you have the power to change.